Thanks. Hi, everyone. I believe they want me to share a 12-minute documentary video with you all. This is talking about critical minerals. So I'm going to go ahead and first share the 12-minute documentary video, then give a quick presentation, and then we can talk just on hand about critical minerals.
Hi, my name is Krista Shannon. I'm a researcher at Climate Rates International. My name is Mira Rubio, and I am the coordinator for the California Trade Justice Coalition. Hi, my name is Ileana Paul. I'm the deputy director of Sierra Club's Industrial Transformation Campaign.
My name is Maurice Carney. I'm one of the co-founders of Friends of the Congo.
My name is Marianne Comfort. I work for the Sisters of Mercy Americas.
I wanted to firstly ask you, what are critical minerals and why are they so crucial for the clean energy transition? So these include minerals like nickel, lithium, and they're used in a variety of renewable energy transition. So from renewable energies to building solar panels and windmills to building the transmission lines needed to get energy from point A to point B, and to build things like batteries that we need to harness electricity. So really, without these raw materials, they're a necessary piece in building out the actual infrastructure we need to decarbonize from fossil fuels. Critical minerals agreements, also known as CMAs, are targeted trade agreements that seek to strengthen critical mineral supply chains. So depending upon how they're written, critical minerals agreements can help countries meet shared climate, job creation, and sustainable development goals, or they can end up accelerating exploitative models of resource extraction that are harmful to workers, communities, and the environment. So nickel is a mineral used in electric vehicle batteries as well as for some other purposes. And Indonesia is the world's largest producer. Last year, it produced over 50% of the world's nickel, and its market share is increasing. And, local community members told us that their land had been taken by companies without their consent. In some cases, people's land had been destroyed by companies, leaving them with no option but to sell. They were no longer able to harvest food off their land once all those trees were cut. In some cases, members of the police or military came and intimidated people into selling their land. So, for example, we had one person tell us that the police would come to his door repeatedly at 2 a.m. to demand why he hadn't sold his land to a nickel company. In addition to issues around land, one of the things that we've heard quite a bit around nickel is the impact on people's traditional livelihoods. So, people who are traditionally sustain themselves and their families through farming or fishing are no longer able to do so because of either loss of their land or degradation of the natural environment. So both, nickel mining, nickel processing is really harmful, and proper protections for begin.
One of the coordinators of miners, you have collectives that range in the tens of thousands of diggers, cobalt copper diggers. We were just talking with him, and he held up this rock, and you can see the different layers and colors. And he said in this rock there are up to 7 different minerals you can find: manganese and copper and cobalt and tin and zinc, malachite. You just name it, and that's the sense. It gives you the sense of the spectacular wealth that is there. If you go on one of the main roads where the minerals are being shipped out, you can travel for up to 30 kilometers, and you'll see trucks, just lines of trucks of minerals going out of the country. At the same time, all of that spectacular wealth laying there under the ground, as you go into the communities, you find that lack of access to water, potable water, clean water, lack of access to electricity, lack of access to basic internet. So you see the disparity between the tremendous wealth and then the living conditions, the social conditions of people.
So we happen to have sisters in Argentina. We hear from them often about the communities that are being harmed by lithium, which, in case you don't know how it's lithium is extracted there, is by evaporation. So these are very dry areas, and so any process that uses tons of water is very detrimental to diverting the water from the communities and from their livelihoods into this process of extracting the lithium. So that's a big concern. We know of lots of cases of environmental and land defenders who have been killed for resisting projects, all different kinds of mining, including for the energy transition.
Throughout international law, this is a standard practice that Indigenous peoples have the right to exercise informed consent, so the right to get information, to decide whether or not to go in, and ultimately to say yes or no. Out of we interviewed about 4 dozen people impacted by nickel mining in Indonesia. Most of those people self-identified as Indigenous, which people have the right to self-determination. Not a single person we interviewed was able to exercise that right to free prior informed consent. So broadly, across the world, something like 54% of all critical minerals mining projects are located on Indigenous peoples' lands. So Indigenous peoples are disproportionately impacted by these projects. And that being said, they're not necessarily the ones who are benefiting from the minerals that are coming out of that ground.
They're still living in hell, right? They're not the primary beneficiaries. They are getting crumbs. If you take into consideration what the finished product is like. In fact, they complain, say, well, we produce these, this is where the minerals come from for the smartphones, the batteries in the smartphones. Well, we can't afford smartphones. We don't have a smartphone. So they are keenly aware they're not benefiting, and they, for all intents and purposes, living in poverty, extreme poverty as well, in spite of the tremendous wealth that's around. As these minerals are coming out, right, we find, according to the World Bank, up to 70 million or so Congolese live on less than $2.15 a day, of a 110 million population, in a country where economists say that there's $24 trillion worth of natural resources.
Minerals are weak. They'll make it easier for big corporations to come in, extract minerals from one country with no restraint, ship them to another where they can be processed with essentially no regard to labor rights or wages, and then they can send the products back to the US for consumption. And that's essentially how that system exists right now. And there are so many opportunities along every step of this process that are just ripe for exploitation if we don't have the proper safeguards in place. And all we're saying is it doesn't have to be this way.
The way that I know how to do it is to mandate it through government policies and regulations, because I don't think we can count on companies just doing it out of the goodwill. Maybe some companies would, but we can't count on that. We have to mandate it.
Any proposed critical minerals agreement, in order to be successful, needs to do 3 things. So firstly is prioritize, reduce, reuse, and recycling in the critical minerals supply chain instead of just new mining operations alone. 2, needs to create good paying jobs in the value chain industries in both the United States and the regions in which critical minerals are being extracted or recovered. And 3rd, it needs to establish strong binding standards on labor rights, the environment, indigenous rights, and community consent all throughout the supply chain. And it needs to be backed up by swift and certain enforcement mechanisms that will hold the companies accountable.
So circularity is basically reducing the use of virgin resources by transforming the cradle to grave cycle, where a once used material ends up in landfills or incinerators, with basically a cradle to cradle cycle, where the same molecules show up again and again in both reused and newly made goods. So it's like amped up recycling. That's kind of a minimizing what circularity is, but I think for most people, that's what we can attach it to in our day to day. For critical minerals in particular, prioritizing circularity means that there's less lithium mining, less nickel mining, less cobalt mining, but still plenty of EV batteries, solar panels, and more.
Better equipment, implementation of policies that the government have in place, that they regulations and policies that they believe can benefit them. Formalization of the mining sector. They seek support in terms of investment or loans. I believe that they can help them. Materials, protect them as they did, and then just overall information.
Strong labor standards are needed to ensure that workers all along the supply chain have good paying jobs, safe jobs where they're free from harassment, and that they can organize with the unions of their choosing. Meanwhile, strong environmental standards are needed to protect the surrounding community's air, water, and biodiversity.
So those of us who are privileged in the global north, ought to be mobilizing to assure that human rights standards are met, labor standards are met, environmental standards are met in a way that would reflect what we demand in our backyards here in the United States, for example.
We can't let corporations whose only priority is shareholder value or the politicians whose pockets they line dictate how we power our homes, our businesses, how we make essential goods, and how we connect with and manage our lands and our water. So for critical minerals, it means that communities located in mining areas not only directly benefit from the mineral resource extraction, but they also get to shape what the extraction looks like. It means that workers building EV batteries are making family supporting wages in stable union jobs. It means that once a battery has reached the end of its useful life, the individual components are extracted and made into new products. In order to get there, I think it's really essential that up and down the supply chain, there's a respect for human rights, for labor rights, for the integrity of our environment. The pessimist in me thinks that this will be a big undertaking, especially in the current political environment. So I think that civil society has to play a really big role in making sure there's transparency and accountability, both of companies and of our governments. Our governments are here to represent us. They're supposed to be working in our favor. And it's really up to the people to kind of hold feet to the fire if we need to. But I do think that we need a really radically different path forward than the path that we used to date for all sorts of resource extraction and in particular, sort of the things that are traded around the world.
Even 1,000 miles away, say, what's happening in the Congo matters to me. What's happening in the Congo, I'm going to dedicate myself to assure that it's not normalized. Whether it's the tech workers in the UK that's formed a working group, or the workers in the semiconductor and chips industry in Silicon Valley who formed a working group around the Congo, saying that we have to do something. We cannot normalize this condition. The organizing on the ground, the solidarity outside of the Congo, even our having this exchange right now, where I'm sharing with you our experiences in working with folks on the ground. That gives me a tremendous amount of hope.
So essentially, what what this session is about on is rare earth elements, just a transition. So this is also a form of a critical mineral. Sorry. Just to go through who am I as a person, my name is Jeremy Williams. I am a geologist, geochemist, and environmental scientist. I used to be a professor at Kent State University. Now I'm an online instructor and I work for a biotech company at the current moment. But what I did was I used to look in the past to understand the future. So I would look at sedimentary rock formations and utilize analytical instrumentation to understand past geological mass extinctions and understand how they relate to the present. I also, worked with students where we looked at black shell deposition using geochemistry. So black shell deposition is the basis for oil and gas production and how it formed and how we can understand those implications of how they formed and how they were destroyed over the past pretty much 425 million years ago over that time to understand like what was going on and how things change and pretty much you see the same situation happening now and they counted back in the day where you would have formation of oil gases and they would get naturally oxidized and then it would increase CO2 and then it would always end up in a mass extinction. And then we will look at it and understand like different things like what the lake levels did, what the oceans were doing as far as how they reacted to these oil and gas formations. Then also looked at artifacts and seeing how humans use artifacts to pretty much how they use chert and other different artifacts to trade and have an economy for the prehistoric Americans. And also did a lot of water quality research that which they kind of hinted on with the acid, with the critical minerals, meaning that they have a lot of acid mine drainage associated with it, along with farming. Like farming is one of our biggest culprits when it comes to our water quality issue, especially if you're in the Great Lakes region where you have a lot of agriculture and it pollutes our Great Lakes. And I also did a lot of work with groundwater and hydraulic fracturing, understanding how the groundwater hydraulic fracturing it messes up the groundwater system for certain areas that have a lot of hydrofracking going on. And one of the last things that I did as a professor was look into climate change and how it affects the human health of a lot of vulnerable communities like the ones in Haiti, where this is one of the most, pretty much the biggest community, one of the biggest communities that is affected by climate change and human health. So right now, like what I do now is I'm an application scientist. So util I have a lot of manufacturers or like different people come to me to understand what the chemical composition is of their product. And so that's what I do is I create these applications for them to understand what's going on. And I did do a lot of work with battery technology. So you're starting to see a change into people doing more batteries for with the CHIPS Act. Like you're starting to see a lot of companies go into battery recycling. So they're trying to recycle the material and then get the necessary minerals so they're not going out and polluting the environment uh, like as we see. But that is still a big problem where we do have a lot of pollution going on with critical minerals. And anytime you all can jump in and ask me any questions or make a comment. So I wanted to focus mainly on rare earth elements. These are referred to as the seeds of technology, and their significance, like they said in the video, of cell phones, your computers, your flat screen TVs. And the thing is that China holds about 97% of the world's production on rare earth elements. So this has been known for a very, very long time. And the reason why they're called rare, they're really not rare when it comes to their distribution, which I'll show on the next slide. It's just the simple fact that it requires an enormous amount of raw ore materials uh to harness them. So you're stripping away a lot of land just to get this rare earth element material. So that's why we call them rare. And so I just wanted to show you, this is a classic geology diagram that we show individuals where we show the distribution of elements in the earth. So we have what are called our rock forming elements. So these are going to be our heaviest or our majority elements highlighted in the green. And if you see in the blue where it says LA all the way to LU, those are our rare earth elements. So they're not that rare. In fact, our rarest elements are going to be what we call our platinum group elements. So these are like platinum, iridium, osmium, gold, palladium. Those are going to be our what we call our rarest precious metals. And so one of the things about rare earth elements and precious or critical minerals in general is their distribution. So the thing is that geologically or along the earth, they're not distributed well across the world. So like in the United States, we have beryllium. Also in the United States, we have pretty much a stranglehold when it comes to helium production due to oil and gas formations. And then if you look at China, you can see antimony, beryllium, fluorite, gallium, graphite, germanium, rare earth elements, magnesium, and tungsten. So they have a huge, they have a huge hold on this distribution compared to the rest of the globe. And besides rare earth, besides using them to understand for like production of electronics, we can also use them to understand changes in the environment. So that's where most of my work came in. I used to look at rare earth elements in the landscape and look at their natural occurrence and how they were distributed to understand, let's say, changes in water flow, changes in sediment load over time. We can use it to understand changes in the environment, volcanic eruptions and how that those volcanic eruptions are traced. So we can use them as tracers too. So we can use them for very, very cool um, applications to understand what has happened in the world. The biggest thing that you all have probably heard about is the actual political climate of surrounding rare earth elements. And recently, with the Trump administration and the trade wars, and also the Ukraine deal, and these are some of the things you can imagine. These are some of the reasons behind a lot of the administration's take is to have these trade wars to have more of a footing or get more leverage on having America control the rare earth elements or having the U.S. government or what do you want to call it, having them to control these minerals because these are the minerals of the actual future. This is what's driving human ingenuity into the next century and for the foreseeable future. How long will this resource last? Well, this resource is not a very long resource. This is a non-renewable resource, and most of the time we're doing large types of mining to get this resource. So it takes millions of years to create it, millions of years to destroy it, and just like other metals, they're going to be in ore bodies. So it's a very slow process. So just to give you an idea of this is a table of some of the critical resources that we have in the country and in the world. And so this is calculated. So the idea is to understand the lifetime. And you can see, for instance, with chromium, the US has zero resources, but it's expected that there's like 75 years of resources of chromium left in the world. This timeline is going to change due to the fact that we're starting to do more recycling materials or using more recycling materials. But this gives you an idea. For instance, like with in the US, you can see that it's not distributed equally across the different types of metals. So for instance, we have iron. Iron is expected to last 40 years in the United States, but in the world it's 120 years. So our politicians, our businessmen know this. So this is going to pretty much drive a lot of trade and different things that we see or or discussions that we see along the political climate. So, like I said, the way to make this resource last longer is through efficiency and conservation. One thing that was a good thing about the CHIPS Act, we could talk about some of the bad things that were associated with the CHIPS Act, like how the Biden administration gave Japan I guess like a free trade or agreement where they could also get in on critical minerals being used in from Japan into this to help their economy. So there are some things that were wrong with it, but one of the good things that was good with it is the fact that it did increase like recycling. It was a big climate change initiative where it focused on environmental impact and climate change associated with the use of critical minerals by focusing on recycling methods. And yes, Ellen,
What's in the picture, that big lump? What's in it?
this picture, I believe it is I'm sorry. This picture is a picture of probably malachite. This is a copper ore. So what you're seeing is a copper ore, the green and blue. Green and blues are naturally associated with copper ore minerals. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So with the CHIPS Act, they did do a lot of things with recycling. So we see, and in fact, as a scientist, I'm starting to see more what we call companies associated with grabbing your lithium ion batteries, recycling them, and then producing them they sell the minerals associated with it. So they're into that business has been growing, and we're starting to see more of those companies pop up across the world. And like I said, minerals aren't, we're on this world. One thing that makes our country probably one of the most profitable countries is that we sit on a treasure chest of resources. And it just depends on what the cards that you were dealt um from the geological history. And so that means that you have to have trade to help the imbalance. And from this, we know many wars have been started due to just the resources of minerals or raw materials. And for instance, in the United States, our biggest thing is national security. So manganese, platinum, chromium, and cobalt are very big when it comes to our national security and defense. And rare earth elements are becoming more and more big into that picture as well. And from an environmental perspective, is that you have a lot of open pit mining. So these open pit minings, you can think of West Virginia as a classic case. This is a picture from West Virginia where you create these large volumes of waste tailing, and this tailing makes often the water acidic, non-drinkable, and then it destroys the environment around it. So we have a lot of acid mine drainage associated with the mining of minerals and rare earth elements. So, for instance, one of the things that we see a lot with mining is that often these minerals are associated with ore bodies. So these ore bodies are going to be associated, like your copper is going to be in a sulfur-based ore, and so it's considered a sulfide. And when it's introduced to oxygen, like the air, is going to turn into sulfate, and it's going to release sulfuric acid into the water. And so this is why you have acid mine drainage. This is why you have those red colors that you see from mine drains. Even if you were to like put a pot, if you have like a pan out or something that's iron based and you start to see rust, that's pretty much what's going on. And so what that does is it lowers the pH of the water, makes it acidic, and then it just introduces a lot of heavy metals and kills like all the a lot of the critters and the plants and organisms in the ecosystem. So this is a really, really big problem. It's still a big problem in the United States, especially in the Midwest where we have a lot of open pit mining. And so they also release a lot of toxic chemicals. We've heard about things like Cancer Alley. That's one iconic thing where we have these mining and also manufacturing of these minerals. And then it takes a very, very long time to just clean up this environment. So oftentimes these companies are given 100 years to clean up the environment after they do an open pit mining situation. But there are some things that they can pretty much get away with. Like they could go in and say, okay, I'm going to clean up this land, but I can also clean up another sector of land. So it's not treated as fairly as one might think.
So you were talking about recycling of, like batteries and so on. And my curiosity is, like I know like with metals and things, there's something called metal fatigue. It's like you can only, I wonder about the breakdown of these minerals, the critical minerals such as lithium, for example. If you take a battery back and you recycle the material in it, does the quality of that that critical mineral degrade over time, or when it gets recycled, is it still usable again as it would be if it were freshly mined, so to speak? I'm probably not saying this well, but
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yes, actually, that is the case. It is actually it's just as good to when they break it down, they can kind of get back to that normal level of the actual mineral because it's there's not a lot when it comes to a lot of critical minerals. Often you're not dealing with a lot of chemistry that is changing. Like with rare earth elements, you don't have to deal with the like when it comes to certain things when you're recycling them, you don't have that issue with open pit mining where you're changing the actual environment. Like you're going in, you're introducing these ore bodies to oxygen that's creating like sulfuric acid. In this case, you do have things to worry about like greenhouse gases to a degree, but it is a lot. Say it is not as potent as let's say somebody going in and doing an open pit mining. So the level of greenhouse gases diminishes significantly. And it is like kind of getting a new battery. Like a lot of our products, some of our products now, recycled material works just as well as when it first initially came out of the mine.
Interesting. So it seems like it would make sense from what you're saying. It sounds like the recycling would be a more efficient and less damaging practice than going and mining more of it and processing it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one thing that, like I said, the Biden administration was doing was they were trying to get more recycling efforts going on when it comes to minerals and creating and help fostering that job sector or that part of the economy to grow in order to establish like, hey, let's instead of exploiting all this land, let's go and try to gather everything that is recycle or create more opportunity for recycling the cell phones or making these companies go out and actually get the recycled material to create the next iPhone again instead of going out and just grabbing the minerals. Yes, Bill.
Years ago, I used to hear of something called design for disassembly that was being, I think in Germany, they were promoting this and so on, and it never really caught on here. But like if you design a phone that for the end of its useful life, that it can be most economically turned back into the materials to make a new phone. Do you ever hear anything about design for disassembly nowadays of making something so that it can be in a closed loop cycle?
Yeah, so you hear about it from mainly like the with the it's called black mass. So lithium ion batteries, you're starting to see that. Well, it's still growing, but you see a lot of like I said, I'm gonna keep referring to the CHIPS Act, that act helped like with people with companies going in and like I said, you've seen a lot of companies pop up and you've seen a lot of companies around the world even pop up. They're still popping up to this day. Like there are a lot of startup companies that are going in and trying to go out and grab as much recycled material to resell back into these to like companies to manufacture goods. So yes, you do. Yes, that's starting to happen with the new administration. I'm going to get into that soon, but it's not as it's not as they don't look at it in the same way as the past administration. Yes, Ellen.
Um, when people are doing the mining and they get these chunks of ore to extract the minerals in a pure form, are they using really harsh chemicals? Are they using a lot of water, a lot of what?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different processes. I didn't go into detail about the processes, but you have a lot of smelting going on. So people use different like once it's mined out, it goes to a factory to get broken down. And then there's some harsh. So this is for instance, I don't know if you ever heard of like DuPont Chemical or DuPont. They are really big into that. In fact, like I will say, the Cancer Alley situation, that's DuPont going in And these towns were surrounded by DuPont plants where they were manufacturing a lot of toxic chemicals. Even these chemicals themselves weren't precious metals, but they were other chemicals. So you do have that situation where you do see uh, towns living by these plants if they're not invested in properly to mitigate their waste, then you do see health effects associated with it.
Thank you.
And so a big thing about this is that you should we talk about regulation of mining, and I'm just going to circle back to the 2016 election. Remember when Hillary Clinton kind of said something about coal mining being dead, and to that extent, and this is like this is where it was coming from. Of course, we know the other side took it the wrong way. Other side, of course, spent it and made it what it is now today, but it's essentially looking out for these individuals, making sure that they have the right healthcare protections, they have the right protections when they're going out and doing these mines in these mining towns as well. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that have gone on, like so the the expo for human health, it can affect the respiratory system, um, pulmonary fibrosis with neodymium, cerium, and lanthanum. Uh, Cerium and gadolinium can decrease hemoglobin. Neodymium and oxygen. I mean, not neodymium and lanthanum can destroy the DNA. You can also have nervous system factors with lanthanum, neodymium, and gadolinium, a reproductive health with cerium and gadolinium. So this can really affect the entire human body if you're exposed to these elements, uh, and where these individuals are exposed to these elements, whether it be by factory, by living near a factory, by harnessing them, or even just regular pollution along a daily basis. And we can even talk about pollution living next to a highway. How often you can look at the health of the individuals living next to the highway versus people that don't live next to a interstate. One of the things that is really concerning about this administration is their willingness to do deep sea mining. So deep sea mining of rare metals is one of the things that the Trump administration wants to do. And in fact, a lot of their cabinet members, like the Department of Commerce, is very pro deep sea mining. And we're starting to see this isn't really being talked about in the news, but the administration is really trying to open up a lot of deep sea mining for critical minerals because along with hear about the Ukrainian deal, but this is another thing that they're trying to do because this could, if I can open up critical minerals or mining of critical minerals along the ocean floor, imagine the amount of resources that I can obtain. And there are a lot of uh, minerals or critical minerals like rare earth elements that are along that sea floor bed. So this is a picture from NOAA where you have these manganese nodules. So these manganese nodules, I'm not going to get into the science behind them, but they're like these big nodules that sit on the ocean floor. And so they're just contained with a ton of precious and critical minerals that are needed for cell phones, everything. And it's way higher than any country on the planet. So whoever can get to this resource and harness it, controls the global market. But there are implications behind this because when you go to the deep sea floor, um, or the ocean floor, you're going to do some things that could damage not only the deep sea environment, but also the global climate as well, that are very, very big implications. And so that's not being taken into account. And in fact, when we could talk about, for instance, methane, when it comes to oil and gas, one of the bridge fuels was methane hydrates. So methane hydrates is very deep. and it's along these same areas, and it takes a lot of energy just to get that methane out. And it takes probably more energy to get the to use the methane than it does to it takes more energy to get the methane than it is to use the methane. So it's the same situation with these seabed floors. So exactly what's going on, I'm just going to pretty much go through this in a very simple way, simple schematic diagram, even though it's very has a lot of equations associated with it. You have these black smokers, your seafloor spreading centers. Once they erupt, they're coming from a very high temperature pressure system to a very low pressure and temperature system. And so that causes precipitation of like all of these critical minerals of your rare earth elements. And then they become in the form of a nodule. And then they're just spread out through all the ocean floor. So they're everywhere. And so, like I said, whoever could utilize this technology, whoever could utilize this resource can, control what the economy is going to be like in the future. And not only is that, this is a picture of like one of these vents. As you can see, the different vibrant colors, and this is coming from those seafloor spreading areas. And this is the reaction that you have where you have a high temperature to a low temperature system. And there's an ecosystem that's there too. So you have a thriving ecosystem based off of chemosynthesis that we utilize to help us understand, other planets and the life that they have on their planets, and also help us understand um, early Earth and how organisms were going on with their life, because this would have been the type of environment that the first organisms were living in. So messing with this system could really, really uh, cause some really, really big implications for our global climate. In fact, when we talk about, looking at Mars and different planets, we're actually looking at those different planets sometimes to help us understand what's going on Earth, because those are the same type of environments. In fact, as a professor, I would always show a picture of the moon and the ocean floor, and then the students couldn't tell the difference because they look the exact same. And so this is one of the biggest things that not being talked about. And it's the fact that if you do go in and you try to harness these minerals, you're going to release a ton of methane into that has been trapped for millions and millions and millions of years. And in fact, one of the largest mass extinctions that ever has occurred on our planet, the Permian Triassic extinction, we believe that you had this methane hydrate deposit, like all your methane hydrate deposits become released, and that helped warm up the oceans, that helped warm up the planet, and it caused about 97% of loss of life along this planet over, let's say, 10,000 years. So, and the implications to that is to why that is the case is up for debate. But, going in, and you can imagine when I'm going to get these minerals, I'm going to be messing with these methane hydrates or these clathrates. And you can see this picture shows uh, there's actually way more carbon storage in the oceans than there are on land. So as you can see, like the blues, the different colors, they're all in that picture. These are all different methane hydrates that we know of. And just imagine, and this is where we also find these manganese nodules too. So you can just imagine where if we go in and try to really get these nodules, we're going to have to deal with the pressure and the temperature of the ocean. You're going to figure out a way to pull them up. And guess what? You're probably going to also create a pathway for methane hydrates to be released as well. So this is one of the biggest concerns that, we have to think about when we talk about deep sea mining for critical minerals. And that is the end of the presentation. Yes, Holly.
So, a couple of follow-up questions. One of them is that if it is so much easier and less damaging to recycle these minerals that we already have, I don't understand where the return on investment thinking is coming from on that. And my other question has to do with when you showed that map of where minerals were in the world, and so many of the platinum minerals are up there in the Russia area and so on. I'm just really confused about what governments are thinking and doing. I mean, apart from all of the environmental impact that those of us who are, you know, having to suffer the consequences of it, that's one thing. But even up there on the ROI level, I don't understand what's going on.
It's I think it's just one of those, like, if I can control as much minerals as possible, then I guess it's really much power and greed that's the biggest factor when it comes to this. And we can look back at the Bush administrations. That was power and greed. You know, how can I control these oil reservoirs? That's what the main thing was. Like, I just need to control the oil reservoirs. And I think with this particular administration, they're really thinking about the how can I control these critical minerals? Like, how can I control them? How can I have a global stranglehold on it for just greed and power? And I will say it it needs to be. I agree. I was not going to try to say I agree with the administration in particular, but I agree with the fact that they are bringing that it needs to be dealt with, but the way that it's, of course, we know this administration, they do everything so chaotically and just for greed and power. It's not about conservation, it's not about best practices, it's about me. And so that's the biggest thing. But rare earth elements in general, that's been talked about for a very, very long time. Like, everybody knows that China had the stranglehold on rare earth elements. And they know that because they just have the resources are there. And they know that they have the control of the shares. So that's how even like past presidents, they knew that. And that's how you could probably say, like, well, why was the Obama administration or the Biden administration dealing with these different countries a certain way? And it's the idea of, like, well, we still need these minerals to for our own economy.
Thank you. This has been fascinating.
Hmm.
Kind of scary too.
Yes, very scary. Yes, Ellen.
Um, do, do we think we know where all these quote rare earths are? Is that so? I mean, that's sort of it. It's not that they're huge areas we haven't explored.
Yeah. I mean, the next thing to do, I mean, after that is to go to space and to get rare earth elements. And we seen a movie about that type. What happens when what's called Don't Look Up came out. That would be the next step because often what a lot of people don't know is that, a lot of these planets are just like the Earth. They have the exact same, like, the distribution of metals across the solar system is the same in Mercury, Venus, Mars, Earth, and the asteroid belt. So we know that.
So that's a great incentive for people to want to get. I would have thought the moon was also similar, but
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah, the moon too. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention the moon. Yeah, the moon is pretty much a fragment of Earth that was but yes, that's also a area where you could probably see. If they have their way, they could go to the moon and start trying to figure out a way to get these minerals. So yeah.
I read that one of the advantages that China has is that they can process the rare earth minerals. Um,
Hmm.
they can have big factories and they don't have to have any kind of environmental standards or not that we're not ones that we're supposed to live by. And they don't have to pay people a living wage. Not that
Right.
we believe in doing that, but
Yeah, so yeah, that is the case. They don't have to pay people a living wage, and then so it's like if you get a cell phone, if you get an iPhone, like I always tell people, you know, your habit of buying an iPhone, that's not going to, we have to change how Apple goes about and processing these helping, getting these things manufactured. And you can say the same thing about the United States. Like the United States, we always hear about the helium shortage across the world. And guess who has the helium reserves? We do. We have all the helium reserve in the world, and we have the power to say yes or no when it comes to helium.
Helium's a gas. Where is it?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So helium, the way we get it, yes, helium is like one of the most abundant gases, but it's the lightest gas, so you can't get it from the atmosphere. You have to get it from oil and gas reserves. So that's how it's processed. Yeah. So you get it from oil
Wait,
and gas. It's an accessory. So when you go do oil and gas exploration, helium is an accessory to you. You can get helium from oil and gas, and that's how we get that's how we get all our helium from is from oil and gas reserves.
so if I buy a helium-filled balloon, I'm supporting the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah.
Given what you just said, for me it begs the question: is part of why the petroleum industry is not so eager to look at other energy resources is because of the helium?
Um, that's a part of it, but also there's no incentive for them to look at other resources. Like we created it where there is no incentive for them to go do other things. The thing that you're going to start hearing about more is carbon capturing.
Right.
I actually have quite a few friends who work in capturing, and I would say these are very liberal people that believe that it can work sustainably. Yeah, I do have my thoughts about it, but they definitely are kind of like it can be done sustainably. There are ways, like I know people that have worked on different projects. You also hear about looking at hydrogen gas or trying to get hydrogen gas from iron formations. That's another thing. That I've heard that I know some people that are working on, and like you hear about Bill Gates supporting it. You also hear about Jeff Bezos supporting it. So you hear about billionaires trying to get behind this technology, and they're really trying to get behind this technology to say to like it's like a power grab. It's more of a power grab instead of uh a humanitarian grab. Is that's what it's coming from. So you do see, yeah, it's a
Wow.
yeah, you see more of the billionaire, like I guess the tech industry getting into that, and they're just doing it more of like, hey, this is where the future is. So let me try to get into this while I can. Um, I don't know about I'm not too sure about the practices of it, but yes, like it's better than oil and gas in that long run, but still there are a lot of environmental implications. So you're starting to see like Australia look into this technology for hydrogen gas from iron formations. The United States is starting to do it, so you're starting to see a lot of that too.
Wow.
But it's like once the billionaires come in, you're kind of like, it's not the government saying, I'm sorry about that noise. It's not the government saying, let's support this. We're now looking at it's billionaires that are backing it. So that brings in a whole like, okay, what's your motive? What is your true motive behind why you're supporting this particular thing?
Well, the billionaires are the government, but
Right.
Right.
is
Right.
anybody? I'm sure people are trying, but are there real, really positive moves that are being taken
I think with
to
the black
protect the
man,
seafloor? Or I think you said people were working on recycling some of these elements, but
yeah, and you do have a lot of scientists that are still trying to fight against, trying to get the word out about like making sure the administration doesn't go into deep sea mining. Mm, there, a lot of scientists are starting to become more activists in that role. I would speak firsthand. I don't consider myself as an activist, as a scientist, because it's just something that you're not trained for. You understand it, but you understand the world, but you don't understand activism as a whole, but you have the information for the activists. But you're starting to see, I would say one of the feedbacks to this administration is that you're starting to see scientists become activists and really start to speak out instead of just kind of staying in a bubble and trying to do things. I know, like me as a research and development scientist that works for a corporation now, I do see, you do see these people that are the manufacturers, like the people that are working on the plant. They're really trying to, they're the people that are working for these companies are really trying to lower their carbon footprint. Like you do see the initiatives coming from people like us that work there. So you do see it. You do see it often. You see it a lot. And you do see companies in general, but there could be more push to like make them go a little bit harder.
It's interesting. I've got the word that's coming to mind right now in terms of activism is triage.
Yes.
It's like what is the most devastating thing that attention needs to be turned to? I'm also noticing what time it is. Thank you so much for this. Really, I feel like I'm just wow.
I'd also plug for people to check out our website, Critical Mineral Justice. For it might, that's where, we've listed the things that we could use everyone's help sort of advocating for. A lot of it's just visibility, making sure that some of the most not transparent trade negotiations in our history get some light shined on it. But I would encourage people to check out that website if if this is something you'd like to keep track of, because it's going to be an increasingly big deal, and it's just critical minerals justice, so it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
You're welcome.